Today we're going to talk about your US stove model 8500 multi-fuel furnace. And I'm going to talk about setting your furnace up and fine-tuning your furnace to where you can have trouble-free operation, to where you can depend upon the amount of heat that you get out of the stove for the particular heat settings you set it at. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that when you install this stove, you need to adhere to the US stove installation manual and setup guide. The ductwork that you put out for going into your furnace, if that's the hookup you're going to use, and the double wall pipe for your exhaust is critical. Make sure you follow the recommended manufacturer specs on the chimney and the vent going out. That's very critical. There's a couple things you're going to need to fine-tune your stove. And while I'm standing here, you can see on this door here, there is a burn indicator. Now, I'm using a Rutland burn indicator. It's a real nice indicator. It's very reliable. I've had this one for years, back when I had the wood stove. And it goes all the way from room temperature up to about, 800 degrees. This particular stove, you're not going to want to run over about 650 to 700 degrees on that burn indicator. You want the burn indicator on the door. Now, for those of you that have one of the early model King stoves, as I do, you can see they don't have a window in it, which makes it tough to determine how your fuel is burning. Now, there's a simple mod you can do to your door, which I have, to give you the ability to look inside that burn chamber and assess the flame and the draft setting and the condition of how it's burning. What you do is I used a 3/8 inch pipe plug, and I just got a little socket that pulls it out, drill it, tap it with a 3/8 pipe tap, and you can look right down inside there and see how your flame and your burn rate is going. The hole in the door will not affect the draft fan or your draft fan settings. I wouldn't recommend running it with that hole open, but you can certainly leave it open long enough to look at it and see what's going on. Now, the second tool that comes in handy setting this furnace up is a laser temperature indicator. And you can hit it right on the door and it will tell you exactly what your temp is. And you can also check the side where your exhaust comes out, your unit, for draft fan temp. And if you have a problem or you want to check to see what the temperature is, you can hit that and it will show you. Right now I'm running a draft fan temp of 166. You're not going to want to have over about 230 degrees on that draft fan stack coming out. Yeah, it's getting pretty close to where it's going to hit the limits on it. So this unit does come in handy. Once you get it dialed in on your heat settings, you shouldn't have to worry about that at all. And the only time you're going to have your draft fan temp going up is if you start getting a blockage or restriction in your chimney stack from fly ash. Now, assuming that you've installed your furnace properly according to the US stove specs, and you've set your fuel type up. This is for pellets, PR, and the CR is for corn. We're running pellets, cherry pits. You just adjust your feed rate for it. There's a couple of things you want to check. And right off the bat, you want to check to make sure that your number 2 blower is set up to come on properly. I've had a problem. Mine came from the factory to where the number 2 blower would not come on. I've run into other people as well. And the way you do this is hold your mode and your delay button down and you'll get into your programming. You're going to want to toggle up on the high heat range here to 15, which will check to see if your number 2 blower is set to come on. Once you get to 15, push your on button. You can see there it's on number 2. And what that's telling you is that when you are running on a heat setting on this furnace at a heat range of 2 or higher, both blowers will be running on your machine. This is important. If this is not set on 2, it's set on an erroneous figure. When you get your machine, you're going to over temp it, and the machine's going to shut down, and you're going to be scratching your head wondering, why in the world is this machine shutting down? Your fire's burning good, everything's happening right. It's because that your number 2 blower is not programmed to come on at the number 2 heat setting or higher. Check that out before you fire your furnace up to make sure that this is right. Now to exit out of this, you just push on. It goes back to your prompt, and then push off. Now we're running on heat setting 3 right now. We're in the northern country here. It gets cold here. We run this furnace at high heat settings during the winter time. As a matter of fact, we got a cold snap coming, and it's going to be going down to minus 3 tomorrow morning. And I have this furnace set up to run on a thermostat. If you see this dash flashing, that's not to be concerned. That's typical for a thermostat run program. Let's talk about now setting up your feed rates. The way you access your feed rates is by pushing the bottom arrow of the heat range and the auxiliary at the same time. Bottom arrow is the lower heat range. That is the feed rate for the number 1 heat setting only. I'm running 2.5 pounds an hour on this in cherry pits. Your fuel for pellets, ballpark around 2 pounds per hour. That will give you a heat setting of approximately 350 to 400 degrees on your burn indicator. You can run that lower, you can run that higher depending upon the weather conditions, the size of the house you're heating, so on and so forth. Now, you're going to want to set your low heat range, number 1, get that established on your burn indicator around 350 to 400 degrees. Once your furnace stabilizes, let it run at temp for an hour or 2 hours. Make sure that the temp is feeding properly and your temp is stable. Then you're going to want to set your high heat range. Now the way you do that is you push your top arrows on your control panel. At the same time, that gives you your fuel rate feed for your number 5 setting. I have this set at 6.5. Your standard wood pellets, you're going to want to be in a ballpark of about 4.8 or 5.0 for pellets. That should give you close to 650 degrees on your burn indicator. And of course, I didn't tell you this, but if you want to change the setting, you just take your auxiliary button. If you want to run it down, you can run it down. If you want to run it up, you can run it up. I'll put it back at 6.5 pounds. And once you get it set where you want, then push your on button and you're set, ready to go. Now let's go over to the burn. Now as you can see, I'm running heat level 3, and I'm running about 550 degrees on heat level 3. Your max temp on heat level 5, you're going to want to be anywhere from 650 to 700 degrees. Now you can tell when you get there, because when you start bumping up against the thermocouple stops on that draft fan, it will momentarily stop the auger feed to lower the temperature. This unit bumps up against that high stop, and it calls for the auger to slow down or stop to lower the temp, your dash will start flashing. You can set that on heat number 5, and you can play with your heat settings to move that fuel rate up to get to the temp you want. And when you start seeing that flash after that's been stable and stabilized at that high heat temp, that's telling you you're bumping up against that shutdown, ramp down stop. You want to be probably about 50 degrees below that ramp down stop. And like I say, on my particular unit, it's about 650, 700 degrees, determining upon your draft and whatnot. Okay, now we're looking at the back of the furnace in operation. Depending upon your situation, whether you have children or animals around, that will determine whether or not you take the back panel off of the unit. I prefer to run this furnace with the back panel off because when we're running at higher heat temps, it does get awful warm inside. And of course, as most of you know, the most harmful thing to electronics and circuit boards is high heat. This provides extra cooling while the unit is running, not only for your control panel circuitry, but also for the power vent motor. It also enables you to see what's going on with your auger motor and how much dust you're getting coming in to the back of your unit. Now, I screen the pellets and the fuel that go into this machine, and I probably vacuum out the dust that falls out of the bottom of the hopper maybe once a month, and there's very little dust in it at that point because of the screening. Your draft fan motor back here has a little plastic cap right there on the top, and that's an access to put oil on the end of that shaft. Now, you want to make sure you get the right type of oil, and you only want to put a drop in there. And I put a drop in about once a month. It keeps the motor running real smooth. Okay, now we've talked about the basic operation principles of this model 8500 stove. You want to dial in the stove and get your number 1 and number 5 settings set. You'll really like this furnace. It runs like a top once you get your heat settings set and you understand the operation. Now you're going to want to take and set those heat settings up every time you change types of fuel. If you go from pellets to cherry pits to corn, you're going to have to set that back up at the number 1 setting and then at the high setting, and that will put your stove to where it will run dependable at heat settings that you select on there. Now, the only other thing with this stove that there's a little glitch is with the agitator. The cast iron agitator that comes from US Stove works fine, but it does squeak, it is noisy, and it erodes after you run a certain amount of pellets through it. I have found that you're going to be running their cast iron agitator approximately 2 tons, and the agitator is going to be eroded to where it's going to become unreliable. Now here I have a cast iron agitator from US Stove, and as you can see, this one is eroded quite a little bit. We've run this agitator for about 2 ton, or in other words, 4,000 pounds of pellets. And this one is unusable. These tangs can bend and jam in your burner pot and shear the pin on your agitator motor. This is an aftermarket agitator. It's made of stainless steel. It's factory machine and jig welded. This agitator here has run 3 tons of pellets so far, 6,000 pounds, and as you can see, it looks brand new. The shaft has been redesigned to allow for easier removal and installation out of the burner pot, one-hand installation. It runs silent in the burn pot. There's no squeaking. The only noise you might hear is if it catches on a piece of fuel and thumps it, it runs absolutely quiet. This agitator will probably last or outlast the life of your furnace itself. These are available on the link on the YouTube video, and you can purchase them there. They're a fine addition to the Model 8500 furnace.